Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about ReflectRefrain and just what makes him so good. He's kind of the hot topic card right now. In fact, he has been for quite a while, pretty much ever since he/she came out. And we're going to be talking about just what makes ReflectRefrain so powerful and the possibility of him being banned. So for those of you who aren't familiar with ReflectRefrain, which honestly is probably like two of you, he is a two-sided ruler, just like most of them. On his ruler side, he has three abilities, four including Judgment. The first one says that you can add a counter to him and then give a resonator +200/+200 until end of turn. The other one says that you can add a counter to him and then you may draw a card and then put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library. The last ability says that you can make target resonator untap at the end of your turn, or at the end of the next end phase, more accurately. On the other side, on his J-ruler side, this is actually a girl on this side. They're twins. The first, he has again three abilities. Well, four, kind of. One of them says that you can remove a magic counter from this card, or I'm sorry, remove two magic counters from this card and return a resonator to its owner's hand. The other ability says that you can remove X amount of counters from this card, and you can counter target normal spell that costs X. And the last ability says that you can remove four counters and search your deck for any card and put it into your hand. And then the other sort of fourth ability is that you can flip Refrain back over to the Reflect side. Now, that's a lot of abilities. For those of you who play Magic, a lot of people compare this guy to Jace the Mind Sculptor. I won't go too much into that. He's really actually better than Jace the Mind Sculptor, in my opinion. But just knowing that, you should know that this is a crazy powerful card. So, what's the number one reason why this card is so powerful? In my opinion, it's that it has free abilities. Now, technically they're not free. You have to add and remove counters to do this, but the point is it doesn't take will to do it. This allows you to basically cast an extra spell every turn that you wouldn't normally be able to cast. This is very unique to Reflect and Refrain, whereas most rulers require you to use will to activate any of their abilities. This is one of the reasons why I don't really think the Primogenitor, Gil Lapis, will really be a counter to Reflect Refrain. A lot of people say that Gil Lapis really hoses Reflect Refrain, and Gil Lapis definitely does have a strong counter ability to R&R, because he can cancel an activated ability, which is any of Reflect Refrain's abilities. The problem with that is that you have to pay will to activate Gil Lapis's ability, whereas R&R you can activate simply by adding or removing counters, and you can spend your will to cast a spell from your hand. So this scenario basically amounts to the Gil Lapis player always having to keep stones open in order to pay will to cancel the ability that the Reflect Refrain player is being able to use for free, and this will always put them behind. The second reason that I think Reflect Refrain is so good is that it has multiple non-strategy specific abilities. And what I mean by that is you have rulers like Bahamut, for instance, that is a very powerful ruler. However, Bahamut is pretty much exclusively good in an aggro-based strategy. Whereas ReflectRefrain has abilities that are good in basically every deck. Any strategy that you're playing becomes better when you're playing R&R. This is because the filtering ability, primarily, this is his single most useful ability. It allows you to get to cards that you want and get rid of cards that you don't want at any given time. So every turn, I can choose to take a card that might be better against my opponent than a card that I already have. And this is good whether I'm playing control or combo or aggro. Of course, the tutor ability is also a major one for this. This is particularly relevant in combo decks, but again helps any strategy. Also, the ability to bounce resonators is always good. You can always slow down your opponent or save your own resonators from being destroyed, etc. So all of these abilities are good no matter what type of deck you're playing. The third reason why R&R is so strong is that he cannot be removed. Okay, technically this is not true. There are things such as Blazer that can destroy this J ruler. However, if the R&R player knows what they're doing at all, they can easily prevent this from happening. So the fact that it can't engage in combat just makes it extremely resilient. There's nothing that can easily get rid of it. You never risk losing your J ruler, and if you always have the option of going back to your ruler if you want to use those abilities. In fact, you'll generally be doing this flip back and forth every turn after the first couple turns or so when you've built up some counters. Another point that I'd like to bring up is the errata. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, originally ReflectRefrain could use all of its abilities on both your turn and your opponent's turn. Okay, in fact, that's how it's printed on this particular card. From my understanding, new printings of it do say what the official rules text for it says now, although I don't know that for sure. And what it says now is that you can only use Reflect's abilities on your turn. However, you can still use Refrain's abilities on both your turn and your opponent's turn. The only restriction on Refrain is that you're only allowed to flip back to Reflect on your opponent's turn. So, the idea was that this would nerf his power, because obviously it's restricting the amount of times, or the situations at least, that you're able to use Reflect's abilities. So on paper, or in a vacuum, this makes him strictly weaker. However, in practice, this oddly almost makes him better. And that's mostly due to the +2/+2 ability, or the +200/200 to be more accurate. This is because on your turn, you can use that pump ability and attack in without any fear of a pump in response from a person who is also playing Reflect. Before the errata, they could pump in response, negating your pump, and it would just kind of equal out. Now, if you have the advantage, or it's your turn, like you're the person who gets to start the game, you have a significant advantage being able to pump and stay ahead, because your opponent can never counter that. So in a really strange, kind of unexpected way, the errata kind of made ReflectRefrain even better, which is crazy to think about. because Reflect Refrain has dominated nearly every major tournament since it has come out. So that brings us to the question of, should R&R be banned? This is a difficult question. For one, I think it's generally not healthy for games to ban their cards. This kind of makes people frustrated with the game. You know, they don't like the idea that they bought cards and now they can't play them. That's totally understandable. Although on the other hand, if a single card is constantly dominating tournaments, it can be kind of frustrating for players who want to play with something else. Even though Reflect Refrain has been winning pretty much every tournament, in fact, the last 3 major tournaments or so, I believe Reflect Refrain has gotten 21 out of 24 top 8 slots in those last 3 tournaments, which is pretty crazy. Although those numbers are slightly better than previously, because I'm pretty sure before we had the release of the new set, we would have had all 24 of those be R&R. So that is kind of promising. So this is still a very new format. People could definitely develop strategies that could potentially beat Reflect Refrain on a consistent basis. Reflect Refrain isn't necessarily the end-all be-all. So at this point, I wouldn't really be in favor of banning the twins. However, it is a possibility. And ultimately, I think that comes down to what the community really wants. And the Force of Will company needs to respond to that in order to keep players engaged. But personally, I think the biggest argument for not banning Reflect Refrain is also one of his big strengths, in that he is good in every strategy. This allows you to play many different kinds of decks, even if you're playing the same ruler. So you don't see that same deck list over and over and over again, even though you're seeing the same ruler. And no particular importance should be placed on Reflect just because he's a ruler. If you saw any one other card in every single deck, people would probably not make as big of a deal out of it, such as Cheshire Cat, for instance, although I realize Cheshire Cat isn't in every deck. It is in many, many different decks. But the fact that Reflect is a ruler, people get a little more hung up on that. And I think the game is still relatively healthy, given that many strategies are still viable, even though most of them are playing Reflect. So, with that, I'd like to thank you for watching, and please like the video if you can. If you can subscribe, that would be awesome too. I just started this channel. I'm excited about it. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, and I will try and respond in kind. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.